Hello everyone. In this chapter we are going to talk about how the soul acts in the physical world with the body, and this video will be about the brain, site of the soul. Let's get started. The brain is where the soul resides, and the reason I'm saying that is pretty simple. If I removed your hand from your body, you would not lose your consciousness. If I removed your leg, or any other body part from you, you still wouldn't lose your consciousness, except for the brain. If I removed your brain, you wouldn't be able to be conscious. And since consciousness is the biggest manifestation of the soul, the brain must be the bridge between the soul and the body.
But Thomas, how do you know that consciousness isn't just an emerging property of the brain? Why can't the brain subsist without any kind of immaterial nonsense?
This problem is really easy to solve, because we already solved it before. We said that material reality is not self-subsistent, and it relies on immateriality to exist. Likewise, the brain is a material entity. Therefore it relies on its immaterial form to exist. Since consciousness is an immaterial property, as we determined it to be, then consciousness cannot possibly rely on the brain's existence, because this would break our axiom. Being a physical entity, the brain is the organ that controls all of the animal powers. This means that instinct exists because of it. Why am I telling you? Because this will be a crucial part of this chapter. Of all the animal powers, the five senses are the only ones that don't take place inside of the brain. They take place in the nerves, and in the central nervous system. The brain only elaborates the signals, storing them, recreating them, and using them as a guide tool. This is why, if I want you to stop seeing, I will gouge your eyes, and not your brain. The human brain is thus able to perceive the outer world, but it doesn't work on the supernatural, therefore it bases its decisions on individuality and subjectivity. This is why people who use their brains as an end, and not as a tool for their souls, are often individualistics and do not believe in objective reality. They are not using their being in the fullest, but they are limited in their physical bodies. The limitation of the brain explains why animals have brains which are entirely similar to us, yet cannot use intellect and will. In fact, intellect and will go directly against the brain, because when the brain suggests that a tree is entirely different from another tree, intellect grasps their similarity and groups them both under the same word. And when the brain suggests that you have to eat in the middle of an important event or job application, will prevents your body from going in search of food. These behaviors are not found in animals, yet they all have brains like ours, which suggests that we have additional capabilities, as we have demonstrated previously. But the brain also has powers. It has its capabilities, analogous to intellect and will, and yes, that's what we are going to talk about next time. Until then, be well. Hello everyone. Today we will dive into the powers of the brain. How many are they, what function do they have, and how can we take advantage of them? Let's get right into it. We can see that the brain has two main powers. One is active, and the other is passive. The first one, we can call the irascible power, and the second one we can call the concupiscible power. Both of these powers are sensitive ones, meaning animals also have them, and they're enough for animals to mimic human intellect and will. In fact, the concupiscible power can be thought of as a copy of intellect, and the irascible power as a copy of will. I'll explain both of them right now. The concupiscible power is the one responsible for the distinction of pleasure and pain. It answers certain stimuli and estimates whether they are good or bad for the self. If they are good, then the stimulus is converted to pleasure. If they are bad, the stimulus is converted to pain. The better the stimulus, the greater the pleasure. The worse the stimulus, the greater the pain. It's pretty simple. The irascible power, on the other hand, is an active one. It reacts to stimuli. It is the irascible power that is responsible for the search of pleasure and the avoidance of pain. If the concupiscible power believes a certain entity to produce pleasure, the irascible power consumes it, and if the concupiscible power believes a certain entity to produce pain, the irascible power seeks to destroy it. The existence of these two powers is basically self-evident. Unless you suffer from very rare illnesses, you are able to experience pleasure and pain, and when you do, you definitely feel the need to act accordingly. The similarity between these two powers and the intellectual powers of the human soul becomes more obvious now, since intellect gains information and uses it to determine whether a certain action is good or evil, and the concupiscible power does exactly the same. While will uses the information gained from intellect to act according to the good, and the irascible power does the exact same thing.
But Thomas, if the concupiscible power and the irascible power do the exact same things that are done by intellect and will, why do they exist in the first place? Why is there a distinction between them and the intellectual powers?
This is because the concupiscible and irascible powers are intrinsically flawed. They are very bad at distinguishing good from evil. And this is pretty obvious from the fact that many painful activities are actually good, such as exercising, and many pleasing activities are actually bad, such as drug consumption. The two intellectual powers, on the other hand, are much better at distinguishing good from evil, because they work on the objective forms, and not on the subjective perception of them. Will is then able to stop the irascible power from acting, and intellect is able to modify the perception of the concupiscible power. These two actions performed together form the action of a habit, an action contrary to one's nature that morphs its natural behavior and perception of other actions. We will need to dive further inside of the concupiscible power, the irascible power, and the creation of habits. The next episodes will focus on these themes. For now, be well. Hello everyone. Today we will talk about the concupiscible power, what is its function, how it is developed, and what can we learn from its work. Let's start. The concupiscible power, as I said last time, is a power of the brain which makes up the basis for instinct. Its job is to distinguish good things from bad things, ensuring the survival of the self. The reasoning of this power is pretty simple. If an entity or action will likely help the individual lengthen the lifespan of his genes, it's good, while if it shortens it, it's bad. Whenever the concupiscible power perceives something it thinks is good, a pleasing state of mind occurs, which is known as pleasure, while when it perceives something it thinks is bad, a sorrowful state of mind occurs, which is known as pain. This system thus pushes all animals toward certain common behaviors, such as eating to subsist, reproducing to pass one's genes, or protecting a wound to heal it. Every time one of those events happen, pleasure is felt in the brain. On the other hand, starvation, sexual deprivation, or suffering a wound, are all events which diminish the likelihood of survival of one's genes. Therefore, when these situations occur, pain is felt in the brain. Note well, this entire mechanism is based on the estimation about whether an action will grant our genes a longer or shorter life, not the individual itself. In nature, genes are the important part, and this is confirmed by the fact that many animals, including humans, feel a protective instinct towards close relatives, much more than strangers. For example, almost all animals protect their children from incoming danger, sometimes even sacrificing themselves for them. This behavior obviously brings the death of the self, but it is performed nonetheless because it ensures the survival of the children, who contain half of the parent's DNA. Meaning that natural instinct is directed towards preserving one's genes and not one's self. This is all good, but there is still a question: how does the brain act in order to pursue the pleasing stimuli and avoid the painful ones? And that's exactly what we will be talking about next time. Until then, be well. Hello everyone, today we will take a closer look at the second power of the brain, the irascible power, what drives us and animals towards action. Let's get right into it. The irascible power, as I said last time, is a power of the brain which reacts to the concupiscible power's estimation of an action. Its job is to destroy bad things and consume good things, ensuring the survival of one's genes. If something is a threat to one's lifespan, the irascible power goes against it, and vice versa. Whenever the irascible power feels the pleasure released by the concupiscible power, it individuates its source and forces the body to make use of it, while when it perceives pain, it starts to form intrinsic aversion towards the source and tries to either avoid it or destroy it. This system thus presents a forceful movement of the body for all animals towards certain acts, such as eating to subsist, reproducing to pass one's genes, or protecting a wound to heal it. Every time one of those opportunities are located by the concupiscible power, the irascible power seeks to accomplish them. On the other hand, starvation, sexual deprivation, or suffering a wound, are all events which diminish the likelihood of survival of one's genes. Therefore, when the possibility of these events occurring is high, the irascible power tries to avoid them or destroy their source. The irascible power is the power that makes us feel certain emotions, and we can categorize them all in two groups: good emotions and bad emotions.
But Thomas, don't you think that it's a bit reductive saying that humans can either feel good or bad? Human emotions are very diverse. You definitely can't say that humans only have two moods.
I'm not saying that humans can either feel good or bad. There is obviously a spectrum, a wide range of human emotions. However, these are only two groups. Sadness and disgust are definitely bad emotions, while happiness and admiration are good ones. However, anger and fear cannot be categorized so easily. There are people who like being afraid or enraged, as much as there are people who do not like to be afraid or enraged, or people who like one but don't like the other. These emotions are all different and perceived differently by every human, but they are still perceived as either good or bad. Note that I am saying perception, not objectivity, and you know why. Because, hear me out, not everything we feel like doing is actually good. We often do stuff we shouldn't do, and don't do stuff we should, and I could give you thousands upon thousands of examples. But I know I don't need to, since this is such a claim that anybody would agree. I know every single one of you has experienced a time where they had to do something, such as exercising for example, but an inner force kept pushing back and preventing you from doing that. Or again, maybe you had eaten a lot of calories while wanting to lose weight, but something just pushed for you to keep eating. How do we then stop ourselves from doing stuff we shouldn't do, and do stuff we should do instead? That's what we will talk about in the next episode. Until then, be well. Hello everyone. Today we are going to talk about habits, specifically what they are and how are they formed. This video may also help you if you want to acquire new habits or escape bad ones. Therefore, let us begin. Habits are nothing more than the current configuration of concupiscible and irascible powers. A habit is a series of events that are so intrinsic in the brain that you repeat it every time. A habit can be divided in three major moments: craving, action, and reward. The first and last ones are caused by the concupiscible power, while the middle one is caused by the irascible power. Those three events are looped one after the other, and their repetition forms a habit. Let's get into details. This graph represents the level of pleasure created by the concupiscible power according to the occurring event. As soon as you think about something, the concupiscible power estimates its advantageousness, and creates a sense of lack. This sense of lack makes you want something, it makes you crave it. Once the craving is perceived by the irascible power, it starts to look for a way to satisfy that lack, and as soon as it is satisfied, the concupiscible power enacts a reward, pleasure. That makes you more likely to repeat that action the next time. Let's see an example. You're just chilling on your Mediterranean maritime city, when suddenly your brain remembers that you haven't eaten anything for the past 72 hours. At that point, the concupiscible power creates a sense of lack, which is unpleasing. You then feel the urge to eat created by the irascible power. And when you go to the restaurant to get some pizza or pasta or fish or whatever, the sense of lack becomes less unpleasant. Then when you eat that plate of pasta al pesto, you feel pleasure. The pleasure created by the concupiscible power in response to you appreciating Genoese cuisine. The exact opposite happens when you see the bill and think that maybe you should have gone to Naples instead. So we have seen that habits are directly connected to the two powers of the brain. Can they be altered? Yes, they can. All it's needed to alter a habit is altering one's perception of pleasure, since it is pleasure that makes you repeat a habit again and again. The changing of habits is based on intellect and will. With intellect you trick your brain into liking something because you know it's good, and with will you force yourself to do that something you know is good. The process to acquire good habits and leave bad ones is obviously more complicated than this. If you have a strong willpower, you should be able to change your habits easily. By the way, willpower is the strength of one's will, and intelligence is the strength of one's intellect. If you however struggle with bad habits, I strongly suggest you read Atomic Habits by James Clear. It will explain to you how to deal with your habits in an effective way. But if you don't want to have anything to do with books, then there is a summary video on YouTube. And if you really want to spend less than 30 minutes learning how to change your habits, then I suggest you read the book even more strongly, because it means that your attention span is completely fucked. Let's do an experiment. Open TikTok, find a video lasting more than 5 minutes, then watch it all the way up. if your reaction did not look something like this.
But Thomas, I don't have TikTok, I hate it.
Then you can be sure that your attention span is completely gone. Anyway, this was all for today. The next episode will be the last one of human physics, and you know what that means. The next chapters will be about ethics. And I know most of you are looking for ethical answers. For now, delete TikTok, and see you all later. Be well. Hello everyone, today we will cover a weird topic, the idea that all humans alive may have descended from a single couple of humans. Let's get right into it. The idea that all humans alive are all direct descendants of a single couple is an old one. You definitely know the story of Adam and Eve in the three Abrahamic religions. But there is a chance that humanity actually descended from a single couple. Let me explain. There is a very important bit of human genome stored in mitochondria. This chromosome is passed on through generations only by the mother, and not the father. This mitochondrial DNA can be analyzed and traced back to its very origin. The origin of this DNA would then bring us to the mother of humanity, as this DNA is passed on from the mother only. Turns out, this female human has actually existed. It was in Africa around 200 to 100 years ago. This means that all of humanity does have a single mother. She is called mitochondrial Eve.
But Thomas, are you saying that the entire species of Homo sapiens is descended from a single woman? This is extremely unscientific. Do you know that?
It is unlikely that she was the first Homo sapiens. Rather, it is believed that she was just the only female who has had an unbroken chain of female children. Think about it. A female can have only sons, and in that case she wouldn't pass on her mitochondrial DNA, since it is only passed on from mother to daughter. Apparently, this single woman has had female children, who then had other female children in an unbroken line up until now, while other female humans did not have an unbroken line of daughters.
That's fair, I suppose. But how do you know that there was a single male too? Why can't there have been a single woman but multiple males?
The point is, there actually is a male progenitor too. Do you know that old classic story about females having XX chromosomes and males having XY chromosomes? That Y chromosome is not present in the female, and therefore must be passed on by the father, much like the mitochondrial chromosome is passed on by the mother. Similarly to mitochondrial Eve, the Y DNA can be traced on to a single male living around 200 to 100,000 years ago in Africa. He is called Y chromosomal Adam, and he too must have had male children in an unbroken line, while other males had only daughters at some point in their lineage. Therefore, we have two humans, a male and a female, who lived both roughly at the same time, in the same place, and from whom every human on Earth descends. That is pretty similar to what ancient texts talk about in creation myths.
A significant scientific study this year has concluded that all humans are descended from just two people. The research, which was led by Dr. Mart Stokel from Rockefeller University and David Thaler of the University of Basel, Switzerland, concluded that all modern humans descended from a solitary pair who lived 100,000 to 200,000 years ago. Thaler admitted, "This conclusion is very surprising and I fought against it as hard as I could."
Anyway, This was all for today, and for this chapter. We are officially halfway through the series. We have talked about how things are, in a static way. Now we must introduce a new element to the table, action. Specifically, human action, and how it is related to the universals. We will talk about ethics next time. Until then, be well.